You are walking through a forest. The sounds of nature are quiet here, yet there are thousands of conversations happening all around you. Invisible communication. Our relationship to the forest has always been an important factor for the development of human society. Productive, ecological, social, and cultural functions of forests shape and benefit how we live with nature. Yet, cultural functions, including spiritual and symbolic roles, are often overlooked as being unimportant in addressing the climate crisis. In the late Bill Nye's Story About Feeling, he powerfully describes the importance of a cultural relationship with the land. In his own words, he speaks of a feeling within the blood or body that is tied to the life of the country, describing this connection as the foundation for one's existence. This feeling of tree and country, of how to sense the land, are abilities that have been outweighed in the pursuit of economic growth. In the article, Deforestation and World Population Sustainability, a quantitative analysis, published in Nature last year, the researchers noted that before the development of human civilization, our planet was covered by 60 million square kilometers of forest. Now, because of deforestation, less than 40 million square kilometers currently remain. Through their exploration of human-forest interaction, the researchers went further to suggest that only civilizations capable of a switch from an economical society to a sort of cultural society in a timely manner may survive. But what does this cultural society look like? And even more importantly, how does this society communicate? In the early 1990s, a group of researchers led by Dr. Suzanne Simard unearthed a pattern of fungi linking manifold tree species. What they found was a type of cooperative internet, where carbon and nutrients are being exchanged between trees through mycorrhizal networks. The finding was appropriately coined the Wood Wide Web. In 2020, further research focusing on the architecture of the Wood Wide Web ran an experiment with Douglas fir trees in a plot of land of 67 trees in British Columbia, Canada. They took DNA samples from each of the trees within the plot and used a dispersed, non-random sampling approach to identify the paths of connection between the trees within the plot. In this study, the tree with the highest degree of connectivity was found to be connected to 47 other trees within the plot. These trees, or nodes, are called hubs, defining a point where the connectivity is highest, and for the purpose of our research, the place where the most conversation is happening. So what are trees communicating? Aside from the exchange of nutrients, communication of stress among trees can also be found within the Wood Wide Web in the form of ethylene. Ethylene is a well-known stress hormone in plants and begins synthesis when abiotic or biotic stresses affect the plant's livelihood. An abiotic stress is imposed on plants and can either be physical or chemical, such as drought or high salinity, while a biotic stress is a biological stress, like a disease or pathogen. To have a humanistic relationship with our forests, we understand that trees can communicate with each other. We also now know that they communicate their feelings of stress with one another. Cyanobacteria are one of the largest and most important groups of bacteria on the planet, and are over 3.5 billion years old, and are a highly ethylene-sensitive bacterium. This is due to the ethylene receptor SYN-ETR1 contained in Cyanecocystis within a group of cyanobacteria. This receptor is responsible for regulating the cell surface and extracellular components, leading to the alteration in phototaxis and biofilm formation. With this knowledge, we sought to create a visual language of the feelings of stress in trees. We experimented with different concentrations of ethylene and cyanobacteria. In our own research, a control group and 3 variables were set up. The variables reflected 3 different types of stresses for plants, exploring whether this would have an impact on the visual language in cyanobacteria, and confirm whether the response of different stresses in plants may produce varying amounts of ethylene. First, we applied the cyanobacteria cultivated in the nutrient solution to the petri dishes. In this experiment, 4 of the same plant species were used, 1 as our control, and 3 with varying stresses. The stresses we explored were burning, physical attack, and high salinity. The individual plants were then sealed with glass covers to avoid ethylene spreading into the air. After 7 days, we found that the ethylene emitted by the 3 variable plant groups did affect the phototropism of cyanobacteria. Under the variable conditions of burning, physical attack, and high salinity, we observed that the ethylene released in response to these stresses dispersed the cyanobacteria into differing patterns, suggesting that the amount of ethylene released also differs dependent on the type of stress the plant experienced. Through the practice of biodesign, our research led to the collaboration with the cyanobacteria group as a biosensor of stress in plants. Together, we aimed to create a visual language of the feelings of trees. UNDERLAND is a sculptural expression of this biolanguage that can communicate its own feelings independently and visually. Located within the heart of Melbourne's CBD in the Queen Victoria Gardens, UNDERLAND is a site-specific piece tied to the life of an 110-year-old Lophostemen brushbox tree. The sculpture itself consists of several components: a sliced cyanobacterial reactor, a cyanobacterial reaction tank, an ethylene circulation system, a water circulation system, and a tree sensor. These components interact when the tree sensor detects ethylene within the brushbox tree and sends the corresponding information to a receiver at the base of the sculpture. This receiver then alerts the ethylene circulation system underground to release the same amount of ethylene detected into the sculpture. The gas circulation system, located underground, is responsible for releasing ethylene into the sculpture and carrying away the oxygen produced by the cyanobacteria, while the water circulation system provides a slow and steady flow of water throughout the sculpture, renewing the water every 7 days to care for the health of the cyanobacteria without disturbing their movement. The cyanobacteria live within the slides of the sculpture and in the pool encased in organic glass. Here, the patterns that emerge are created independent of human interaction. They are an expression of the feelings of the old Lophostemen brushbox tree. We designed the form of the sculpture and the space surrounding it to take people on a journey. Approaching from the brushbox tree, we pave visitors onto a path to the Underland. The path encompasses the tree and sculpture in an interwoven narrative between our flat perspective of the land and the tree within the underworld world of the Wood Wide Web. Glazed tier seating into the sealed body of water gives focus to the central sculpture and provides places for rest and reflection. The central sculpture was designed imagining what the form of the Lophostemen brushbox tree's reflected form would appear as. In our interpretation, we see this form as a mirror image of the flat perspective form of the tree, reflected and subtracted into magnified slices of life. Through this design, we aim to communicate an idea of bringing the communication and feelings of the Wood Wide Web up from the Underland and into our view. We envision this as a place that brings people together, that provides a place to rest, and inspires people to imagine the possibility of communicating with nature. Underland, making the invisible visible.